In this segment, we'll be taking a look at Brown versus the Board of Education. By interpreting its powers broadly, the Supreme Court can help reshape American society. We want to analyze what was the significance of Brown versus the Board of Education and what roles did Thurgood Marshall and Oliver Hill play in the demise of segregated schools. As we take a look at the court case Brown versus Board of Education in 1954, this Supreme Court ruling decided that segregated schools are simply unequal and must desegregate. The court ruled that all schools must integrate with all reasonable speed. And this is going to be a problem by using the phrase reasonable speed because it's going to be left up to the states to determine what reasonable really means. Ultimately, this ruling says that by nature, separate is not equal, especially when it comes to public education, that you cannot have any segregated facilities and claim that they are equal. Brown versus Board of Education included many different court cases from around the United States, including a very important case from right here in Virginia. As we take a look at the key people who were involved, we need to take a look at Thurgood Marshall. He gets a great deal of press as being one of the key leaders. He was the NAACP legal defense team leader. He argued the case for Linda Brown specifically, and his argument that the Topeka School Board was violating her rights. Later on, Thurgood Marshall was going to be appointed to the Supreme Court by Lyndon Johnson, becoming the first African American to sit on that bench. Also notable was Oliver Hill. He headed up the NAACP legal defense team here in Virginia. Hill heard that students at R.R. Moton High School in Farmville, Virginia, had walked out of their rundown high school. And in his lawsuit, Davis versus the County Board of Prince Edward County became one of the 5 cases that was decided ultimately under the Brown decision. When we take a look at the role of the NAACP during this period, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People provided the legal teams to challenge these laws, which it had been doing for nearly 45 years by this time. And by providing the lawyers and the funds to file the court cases, that allowed the disadvantaged a voice and a way to challenge. Dozens of lawyers from across the country worked to end laws that allowed for discrimination in public schools by challenging the notion that separate but equal is acceptable. And it simply was not. And one by one, the courts struck down these laws. How did Virginia respond to the Brown decision? Being a state that had deep ingrained segregation, strong in the Jim Crow laws, the state of Virginia vowed to stop the efforts to integrate public high schools and public middle school and public elementary schools. Massive resistance became the key phrase during this time. Schools were closed. Several schools were even shut down for the entire year. Teachers would go on strike. Students would go on strike. Whatever they could do to prevent integration from happening right here in Virginia. We also have private academies springing up. While Brown versus Board of Education said that no public school could be segregated, it did not address private schools. And so therefore we have a lot of private academies that did not have to follow the rules set down by the Brown decision. There was also a great deal of what we call white flight from urban schools. That is, many white families left the cities, moved away to white communities in the suburbs, and thus creating a vacuum, and by simply leaving, were refusing to go to now integrated schools. Efforts in Virginia to stop integration did slow the process, but it did not completely stop it. But it was not until the 1970s that Virginia schools were fully integrated.